New word tonight from the NSA leaker Edward Snowden, answering questions online for Britain's Guardian newspaper, says the U.S. government has destroyed his chances of a fair trial. In his words, openly declaring him guilty of treason. He says that's why he fled to Hong Kong, where he may or may not still be. In fact, the Justice Department has yet to even decide whether to charge him. However, plenty of political figures have called him a traitor, including most recently former Vice President Cheney.
I think he's a traitor. I think he has committed crimes, in effect, by violating agreements, given the position he had. Well, I'm deeply suspicious, obviously, because he went to China. That's not a place where you'd ordinarily want to go if you're interested in freedom and liberty and so forth. So it raises questions whether or not he had that kind of connection before he did this.
As former Vice President Cheney on Fox News, he went on to say that he worries that Snowden still has more intelligence to shop to the Chinese in exchange for sanctuary. Now, today online, the Guardian's Spencer Ackerman asked him to address that allegation. Snowden replied, quote, "This is a predictable smear that I anticipated before going public, as the U.S. media has a knee-jerk Red China reaction to anything involving Hong Kong or the People's Republic of China, and is intended to distract from the issue of U.S. government misconduct." He goes on to say, "Ask yourself, if I were a Chinese spy, why wouldn't I have flown directly into Beijing? I could be living in a palace petting a phoenix by now." Later in the Q&A, Ackerman asked Snowden directly whether he had secretly given classified information to the Chinese government. Snowden replies, "No, I have no contact. I've had no contact with the Chinese government. Just like with The Guardian and The Washington Post, I only work with journalists." He also said that being called a traitor by Dick Cheney is, in his words, the highest honor you can give an American. Joining us now, one of the reporters who first broke the Snowden story, The Guardian's Glenn Greenwald, who was part of today's online chat. So, Glenn, first off, we know Edward Snowden is in hiding, believed still to be in Hong Kong under considerable scrutiny. Why did he want to go public today in this online discussion?
I think usually what happens with whistleblowers is they end up being not part of the debate, either because they are in hiding or because they are indisposed in prison. A lot has been said about him. Lots of accusations have been made toward him, and I think that he feels as though he wants to account for his own behavior and speak directly to the public and answer questions about what he did and why he did it.
He was asked today if anything should happen to him, do others have access to his documents? And he answered, and I want to read to our viewers what he said. He said, "All I can say right now is the U.S. government is not going to be able to cover this up by jailing or murdering me. Truth is coming, and it cannot be stopped." First of all, does he really believe that his life is in danger, that the U.S. may want to murder him?
Just go and read what the U.S. officials are telling media outlets like the New York Times from 48 hours ago. What they're saying is that if the information that he has in his possession, and including the information in his head, ends up in the hands of any other foreign government, it would be the gravest threat to national security in a very long time. So I don't think that it's necessarily probable or likely or anything like that the U.S. government is going to try and use physical force to prevent that from happening. But if you're him and you hear U.S. officials saying that they think you pose the greatest threat to the U.S. national security in a long time because of what you have and what you know, it's certainly sensible to think about those risks, to take precautions. If you look at what the U.S. government has done in the last 12 years in the name of national security, there's a lot of extreme behavior that they've engaged in. So I think anybody in that position would be thinking that way.
Do you buy that when you officials say this is the gravest risk? I mean, do you buy that?
No, I think U.S. officials always say that about any time that they are having light shined on what they've been doing in secret. It's the way that they try and keep that wall of secrecy erected. At the same time, it is true that the National Security Agency is a critically important part of what the U.S. national security state has built up over many years. And if huge amounts of secrets were to simply be turned over en masse to another government, it is true that that would be damaging. But he's been very clear that that's not his intention. If that were his intention, he could have done that in lots of different ways. And so I think what this really is a fear-mongering campaign on the part of the U.S. government to turn Americans and the public against him and therefore turn away from the disclosures that have been making as a result of what he's done.
He says that he has not given information about any U.S. operations against what he's called legitimate military targets. But I mean, his critics would say, well, who is this guy to determine what is and is not a legitimate military target?
What he's saying is that there are certain countries in which the U.S. Congress has declared a war, essentially, the authorized use of military force in places like Afghanistan, and that he isn't interested in exposing secrets of what is being done against those countries. He instead is wanting to inform the citizenry, not just in the United States, but around the world, that the NSA is targeting everybody and trying to erode privacy for all of us.
The heads of the intelligence committees have now asked to declassify information that they say proves dozens of terror plots have been foiled because of these programs. If that happens, would it justify, in your mind, the existence of PRISM and other similar programs that might exist?
No, and this is such an important point. Let's say the U.S. government collects everybody's phone records and taps into everybody's internet chats. They then say, when it turns out that they got caught doing that, well, look, we detected terrorist plots as a result of this program. No, that isn't correct. They ended up detecting terrorist plots because they specifically listened in on the phone conversations or email communications of specific people about whom there was evidence to believe they were actually engaged in terrorism. So what the U.S. government always did in the past, when they battled the Soviets, when they engaged in the Cold War, was it was very targeted surveillance. It was only against people for whom there was really evidence to believe they were engaged in wrongdoing. Indiscriminate, massive surveillance actually makes it harder to find the bad people because they have so much information they can't even process it. But the fact that they end up finding somebody bad through mass surveillance doesn't prove that they wouldn't have found those same people through more targeted surveillance programs.
All right. Glenn Greenwald, Glenn, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Anderson.
The Snowden affair seems to be putting a dent in President Obama's polling numbers. His job approval now underwater, 45 to 54 in the latest CNN ORC data. That's down from 53 to 45 just last month. And as whether Mr. Obama is honest and trustworthy, people are now almost evenly divided. 49 say yes, 50% say no. That's an 18-point swing from May when the numbers were 58 yes and 41 no. Here to talk about the impact, chief political analyst Gloria Borges. So this drop in the approval ratings, how do you account for it? I mean, is it directly related, you think, to the NSA?
Yeah, I think there are a couple reasons here. First is the president's had an awful lot of controversies on his plate, not only the NSA surveillance, but also the IRS controversy over drones, controversy over a leak investigation that some people believe was more of a dragnet. And so the president has been in kind of a defensive crouch on that. When you dig deeper into our poll numbers, also, Anderson, you see this huge decline he's had, again, in that 1 month period of 17 points with younger voters, you know, the under 30 set. These are the stalwart Obama supporters who have real trouble with the surveillance issue. So I think it has a lot to do with it.
He's actually scoring worse than President Bush did on the issue of restricting civil liberties.
I know, he probably can't believe that one, but yes, when President Bush had that warrantless wiretap controversy in 2006, which then Senator Obama opposed, the question of whether he went too far, you see there, Bush, only 39% thought he had gone too far, and now that the president's in the middle of this NSA controversy, 43% of the public thinks he's gone too far. I think that plays into the trust issue, Anderson, that you were talking about earlier. He's down on trust. People always give someone they trust the benefit of the doubt. And now I think they're attaching him to government, which they don't trust. You
think he needs to get out in front of this and kind of lift the veil on these programs? It's a hard thing to do, though. These are, you know, supposedly classified programs.
Right. Well, a couple of weeks ago, he came out and he said to the country, you know, this is a debate I want to have. I'm glad we're having this debate. I think he needs to get out there and lead it. One way he can lead it, and I believe they're trying to do this, is declassify some of the instances in which this kind of surveillance has actually succeeded in thwarting terror attacks. Then I believe the president also himself needs to get out there and lift the veil, as you say, let the American public know a little bit more about what he's been thinking, because a lot of people can be confused for thinking, wait a minute, this is the man who railed against warrantless wiretaps when he was in the Senate. Okay, I get we don't do that anymore, but now he is presiding over a surveillance policy that maybe years ago he might have questioned.
Yeah.
So American people want to hear from the president on this, I think, Anderson.
Gloria, thanks very much. For more on the story, you can go to CNN.com right now.